It began with a single leaked email that set the palace's security alarms blaring. Sometime in late 2019, an aide to Prince Andrew forwarded a message from an anonymous whistle-blower detailing payments made to hush medical experts and private investigators. The subject line, "URGMT Epstein Asset Recovery," betrayed a deeper secret. What followed was a cascade of new evidence, suggesting that Andrew knew far more about Jeffrey Epstein's inner circle than he ever admitted. Court documents now reveal bank transfers to shell corporations linked to convicted traffickers, surveillance logs placing Andrew at guest houses where underage visitors were known to be present, and unredacted witness statements that contradict every public denial. Contrast frames this unfolding scandal. A prince born into privilege, awarded a helicopter pilot's license at age 17, whose glossy portraits once captured him shaking hands with presidents and standing alongside the Queen. And yet, behind the regal facade, a darker story emerges. According to freshly unearthed phone records, Andrew's direct line in Buckingham Palace pinged Epstein's manor in New York more than a dozen times after his famed "I didn't sweat" interview in 2019. Those calls took place during hours when no official royal business was scheduled. Late nights and early mornings, moments when personal discretion should have barred such contact entirely. Now, investigators are asking, who answered those calls, and what precisely was discussed? New witness affidavits, filed in London's High Court, confirm that Andrew attended private dinners at Epstein's Palm Beach estate where young women were allegedly recruited for company. A former house manager, granted anonymity in the case, describes rooms where teenage girls arrived in the company of staff members before disappearing behind locked doors. His Royal Highness was always impeccably polite. The affidavit states, but he never questioned why a girl of apparent 15 or 16 was expected to dance or entertain adult guests. That detail clashes violently with the public claim that Andrew had no knowledge of the girls' ages. Now, the prince's defense counsel faces direct testimony that he saw, heard, and actively participated in gatherings where the victims were allegedly trafficked. Financial records, subpoenaed from offshore trusts on the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands, show sums totaling $300,000 paid to private security consultants immediately after Epstein's arrest in 2019. Those consultants appear to have been tasked with risk mitigation rather than personal protection. In one astonishing disclosure, an invoice marked Field Intelligence Report for 47 describes efforts to identify and discredit potential witnesses prepared to testify against Andrew. The consultants touted their success in contextual social media analysis, claiming to have flagged and neutralized at least 8 anonymous accounts planning to post allegations. One leaked memo brags of media obfuscation tactics employed to bury stories before they gain traction. Most devastating of all is a newly released CCTV timeline from Epstein's New York townhouse, obtained by U.S. prosecutors and shared with UK authorities under a mutual legal assistance treaty. The footage, now under seal but described in court filings, purportedly shows Andrew arriving the evening of July 10, 2010, via a back entrance that bypassed the main security gate. He remained inside for nearly 2 hours, longer than any official visitation log had accounted for. During this period, 2 unidentified individuals are seen escorting a minor through dimly lit corridors toward a private staircase Andrew later used to leave. The palace's official statement claimed Andrew spent no more than 10 minutes in the building. The discrepancy is stark and has reignited demands for a full, transparent inquiry. Pressure has mounted on Buckingham Palace to allow an independent investigation akin to the Wynne inquiry. which previously examined internal palace leaks. Critics argue that only an external, cross-jurisdictional probe, with subpoena power and witness immunity, can untangle the web of connections between Andrew, Epstein, and a broader network of wealthy elites. Senior palace officials, long accustomed to controlling the narrative, now face calls to release redacted documents in full. Communications logs, flight manifests of private jets dubbed the Lolita Express, and holiday photographs that might place Andrew in suspicious company. The stakes have never been higher, as every unreleased page threatens to reveal new layers of implication. And here lies the most chilling detail. Insiders whisper that Epstein retained video recordings of untoward encounters, presumably as leverage over his powerful friends. A discovery of hidden hard drives in Epstein's last known residence has sparked frantic inquiries. Were any of those tapes ever handed to royal courtiers for safekeeping? Or worse, were copies held back to ensure continued loyalty? The possibility of recorded evidence raises the specter of blackmail at the highest levels of British royalty, an unprecedented constitutional crisis that could eclipse any previous scandal. These revelations do more than shock. They shatter the notion that royalty stands above the law. They force the public to reckon with the reality that privilege can conceal predatory behavior under layers of secrecy and influence. And as new documents continue to surface, each more damning than the last, the world watches. Prince Andrew's fate now hinges on whether he will answer the unanswered calls, confront the eyewitness testimonies, and allow every hidden file to see daylight, because only full transparency can begin to repair the trust so brazenly betrayed, and only then might the devastating new details finally meet the scrutiny they demand. Now, newly unsealed financial intelligence reports shed light on a network of accomplices who allegedly facilitated Andrew's movements long after Epstein's arrest. UK law enforcement sources confirm that 3 high-net-worth associates, identified only by code names, transferred tens of thousands of pounds through private bank accounts to cover security and travel expenses for Andrew's overseas stays. One transaction totaling $45,000 was time-stamped just hours before his September 2019 interview with BBC Newsnight, raising questions about who financed his emergency consultations. Forensic accountants have traced those payments to shell companies registered in Seychelles and Panama, the same jurisdictions used by Epstein to conceal his fortune. Each new leak compounds the suspicion that Andrew's departure from public duties in 2019 did little to sever his ties to Epstein's world. During the civil case in New York, brought by Virginia Gifford, a series of deposition transcripts were unsealed this month, revealing startling contradictions in the prince's responses. Andrew insisted throughout that he did not sweat during high-profile events, yet one page of testimony records his admission of a warm handshake that left him uncomfortably moist, inadvertently undermining his denials. He claimed no recollection of visiting Epstein's properties after 2010, but credit card vouchers from a Palm Beach boutique show purchases at a luxury store, located just 2 minutes' drive from Epstein's residence. Lawyers for the Gifford have already filed motions to compel the palace to produce additional records from its discretionary accounts, arguing that these documents could confirm whether Andrew's denials were knowingly false at the time. Eyewitness accounts further erode Andrew's version of events. At the Maxwell trial in December 2021, multiple victims testified they saw him dancing intimately with underage girls on at least 3 occasions, twice at a Florida nightclub and once at a VIP room at Manhattan's Danceteria. These shocking claims were supported by cell tower data placing Andrew's mobile phone at those locations during relevant time windows. One complainant described Andrew offering to take her on a private tour of his luxury yacht, only to have the excursion abruptly cancelled by one of Epstein's aides. That narrative conflicts with Andrew's public insistence that any interaction with minors was entirely platonic and brief. UK prosecutors are now examining whether these encounters constitute grooming. Under modern sexual offences law, a felony punishable by up to 14 years in prison. Royal aides are said to be bracing for the release of private vacation diaries that could reveal Andrew's dark side more vividly. Excerpts from Lord Chatfield's personal journal, obtained by investigative journalists, claim that during a retreat on Epstein's private island in the British Virgin Islands, Andrew was photographed flashing money at casino tables, while underage girls loitered along the shore. Chatfield's diary entries describe hearing Andrew joke that charity sometimes means picking the winning number at poker, before escorting the girls to yachts at dawn. Though the photos themselves remain classified under an injunction from the Queen's Counsel, the diary testimonies are now used to seek orders forcing the palace to disclose all documents referencing the prince's annual Maldives jaunts between 2007 and 2011. Meanwhile, a bombshell testimony from a former private secretary unmasked palace efforts to sanitize Andrew's public image. She alleges that she was instructed to vet all social media comments on royal affiliated accounts, removing any posts that criticized Andrew or mentioned Epstein. In one internal memo slated for destruction, the secretary was told to highlight supportive messages and escalate high-profile defenders, effectively turning palace staff into online propaganda agents. When she raised concerns about the ethics of such practices, she was reportedly demoted and subjected to non-disclosure clauses, a move insiders describe as classic damage control that prioritized royal reputation over accountability. Her legal team is now negotiating an out-of-court settlement and plans to file a whistle-blower complaint under the UK's Enterprise and Regulatory Reform Act. The unfolding revelations have reignited debate over Andrew's role within the monarchy. Constitutional experts warn that the prince's continued association with Epstein's network has irreparably damaged the crown's moral authority. Opposition MPs are drafting legislation to strip Andrew of his remaining honorary military titles, positions that once symbolized national service, but now only serve as reminders of scandal. Public petitions demanding his official divestment from charitable patronages have surpassed 1 million signatures, and media outlets across Europe brand the prince's predicament as the monarchy's Fukushima moment. Meanwhile, global broadcasters routinely juxtapose footage of Andrew's extravagant state visits with images of Epstein's grim cell, framing the prince's downfall as emblematic of elite immunity crumbling under public scrutiny. Calls intensify for transparency. Campaigners demand release of flight logs, internal palace communications, CCTV footage assets. Until these records emerge, every royal rebuttal rings hollow the weight of unanswered questions. Now the spotlight turns to court-ordered disclosures in the US v. Epstein litigation, where newly released FBI affidavits paint a chilling picture of Andrew's entanglement with underage trafficking operations. In one affidavit, Agent Ramirez recounts interviewing a cooperating witness who named Andrew as one of 2 high-profile men seen arriving at Epstein's beach house, each escorted by uniformed security and a teenage girl. When asked to identify those men, the witness pointed to a Marriott photo of Andrew stepping off a blue private jet, remarking, "That's him, tall, broad shoulders, laughing like it's all just fun." That detail directly contradicts Andrew's sworn testimony under oath in 2021, where he claimed never to have flown on Epstein's planes after 2010. Further, the FBI affidavit includes a transcript of a private interview with Andrew's former pilot, Captain Scott, who flew the prince on multiple charity flights ostensibly related to disaster relief in the Caribbean. Captain Scott states he was never briefed on any humanitarian mission. Instead, he was paid a flat fee per hour and instructed to transport Andrew to secluded airstrips adjacent to Epstein's private properties. The captain adds that on several itineraries, logs list medical equipment transfer as cargo, a code he now believes referred to hidden cameras and recording devices used to compile compromising footage. "We were given boxes marked medical supplies," Captain Scott explains. "In retrospect, I suspect those boxes held more than gauze and stethoscopes." As investigators dig deeper, they've uncovered a trove of text, message exchanges between palace aides and Andrew's private office. One thread, timestamped January 2016, shows an aide texting a palace communication director. "PR needs lines if Fox catches wind of trampolines incident," a reference to an undisclosed visit to Epstein's New York townhouse by the U.S. network Fox News. Seconds later, the aide sends another message. "Also prep for call from ME5 asking about vacuum cleaner repair man." Analysts now interpret that odd code as a euphemism for a covert surveillance operation against whistle-blowers, potentially involving bugged household appliances to monitor conversations. The palace has declined to confirm or deny the existence of any surveillance on staff, citing national security concerns. Parallel to those disclosures, the Westminster Magistrates Court has reopened inquiries into Andrew's willingness to submit to an interview under caution in the UK. Defense lawyers argue that the prince has already been "roar than well done," citing his widely panned Newsnight appearance. But victims' advocates and human rights organizations demand a fresh in-person questioning by the Metropolitan Police, pointing to fresh evidence that Andrew misled investigators about his contacts with Epstein. The Crown Prosecution Service is under public pressure. If Andrew refuses to attend a voluntary interview, prosecutors may apply for a summons under Section 2C of the Sexual Offences Act, effectively compelling him to face questioning or risk being held in civil contempt of court. Amid this legal maelstrom, the palace's most senior courtiers have convened emergency strategy sessions. One leaked memo, captured in shorthand on a tattered yellow legal pad, lists 3 potential paths. 1. Full cooperation with UK police and voluntary attendance. 2. Limited document release accompanied by a public apology. Or 3. A total media blackout with an offer to relinquish all remaining royal patronages. Yet each option carries catastrophic downsides. Full cooperation risks self-incrimination. Partial admissions will be spun as half measures by critics, and a media blackout cedes the narrative entirely to opposition tabloids. The palace's official line remains that the prince has the utmost confidence in the legal process, but private whisperers note that even Buckingham Palace's vaults are not secure enough to contain the avalanche of information now in public hands. Adding another layer of complexity, Swiss authorities have opened their own probe into accounts linked to Andrew's ex-wife's family office. Bank rule provisions in Switzerland limit disclosure, but anti-money laundering teams are now examining suspicious deposits of 500,000 spread across 2 shell entities. One named Aragon Holdings, the other Crestline Investments. Investigators suspect these were bribes to silence former staff members who threatened to hand over forensic evidence to U.S. prosecutors. Citations in court filings allege that Crestline funneled payments to a former bodyguard who, according to his testimony, witnessed explicit encounters between Andrew and girls he believed were above the age of consent. That bodyguard later signed an NDA for 100,000, which he now claims was grossly insufficient to buy his silence. In Parliament, the Home Affairs Select Committee has scheduled an unprecedented hearing on royal accountability. MPs from all parties have signed a motion demanding that the palace be summoned to explain its climate of secrecy and the extent of its internal investigations. Committee Chair Dame Louise Evans stated bluntly, "No one is above the law, not even a prince." Opposition leaders see this as an opportunity to revisit proposed constitutional reforms, including the removal of immunity privileges that currently shield royal family members from prosecution under certain laws. Legal scholars note that a full repeal of these privileges would require primary legislation, a move unthinkable a decade ago, but now gaining momentum amid widespread public disillusionment. Meanwhile, public opinion is shifting dramatically. A recent YouGov poll indicates that only 15% of Britons believe Andrew should retain his dukedom, down from 45% just 2 years ago. Sponsorship deals tied to Andrew's patronages are evaporating. Charities once clamoring for royal endorsement are keeping a visible distance, worried that any association could irreparably damage their fundraising. In the financial sector, French and German banks have reportedly begun classifying all transactions involving the Duke of York as high risk, subject to enhanced due diligence and immediate reporting to national financial intelligence units. As this section of the saga closes, one question looms larger than any other. Will Prince Andrew finally face the full brunt of scrutiny his position demands? Or will the palace's tradition of protecting its own prevail against mounting evidence? The answer hinges on decisions that must be made behind closed doors. But their consequences will flood every front page and live stream across the globe. The next move in this legal and reputational chess game could determine whether Andrew's legacy is that of a respected royal or a cautionary tale of unchecked privilege. Senior roles now confront the grim task of damage control as Section 4 of this escalating scandal unfolds. Sources inside Buckingham Palace describe an emergency summit called by the Queen's private secretary, convening the Lord Chamberlain, the Home Secretary, and the Attorney General. The agenda: whether to invoke letters patent governing the suspension of royal duties and titles. Palace insiders warn that removing Andrew's remaining patronages and forcing him into permanent private residency could be the only means to contain reputational damage. But even these drastic steps may not stem the relentless flow of fresh allegations. Just this month, text messages between Andrew and a member of Epstein's inner circle were handed over to the FBI. In one exchange from July 2011, Andrew thanks the associate for arranging discreet travel and notes, "The team will be grateful for your loyalty." Investigators believe team refers not to palace staff, but to a small group of managed contractors who coordinated logistics for private visits. The revelation that Andrew may have knowingly enlisted assistance to hide his movements adds to mounting evidence of deliberate cover-ups. Further court documents, filed in California's Central District, introduce evidence from a former private nurse who treated Epstein's guests at Sarah Kellen's request. She testifies to seeing Andrew rush past medical cubicles where other victims received care. Her statement reads, "He paused at room 7, glanced at the open door, then walked away quickly. I heard a young voice begging him not to leave." The nurse's affidavit was submitted under seal, but leaks to the press suggest that her testimony could mark a turning point. Andrew's presence in medical areas, where underage trafficking victims were tended, connects him directly to the heart of criminal operations. In London, the Metropolitan Police have finally secured permission to interview Andrew under caution, an unprecedented step for a senior royal. Officers from the Child Abuse and Sexual Offences Commands, CALASO, have prepared a list of over 50 questions ranging from his knowledge of trafficking networks to the precise nature of his relationship with Epstein's financial managers. Legal experts note that once interviewed, Andrew will be bound by law to answer truthfully or face perjury charges. Palace sources concede that he has little choice but to comply if he wishes to avoid arrest warrants or formal charges. Meanwhile, the Independent Press Standards Organization, IPSO, has opened its own inquiry into misleading statements made by Buckingham Palace in earlier press releases. Media lawyers point to discrepancies between the palace's claim that all relevant records were handed over to U.S. authorities and now documented evidence that flight logs, communications transcripts, and credit card statements were withheld. If IPSO rules the palace breached the editor's code, this could expose the monarchy to sanctions, public apologies, and financial penalties, further eroding the aura of royal infallibility. International attention intensifies as Commonwealth realms weigh their own responses. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Australian Premier Anthony Albanese have hinted they may reconsider ceremonial roles Andrew holds within their respective orders of chivalry. In a rare joint statement, they asserted that any individual facing credible allegations of sexual misconduct must step back from honorary positions until cleared by due process. Such moves would underscore a broader shift. Colonies once dazzled by royal glamour are now insisting on accountability and equality before the law. In financial markets, Andrew's name has become a red flag. The Royal Bank of Scotland, once a proud sponsor of his maritime charity, quietly ended the partnership earlier this summer. Investment banks now list him in politically exposed persons (PP) databases, triggering automatic compliance reviews for any transactions involving companies under his patronage. Wealth management firms warn clients that continued association could risk regulatory scrutiny in Switzerland, Luxembourg, and the United States, an economic fallout that reaches far beyond palace walls. Amid these seismic shifts, palace communications have taken yet another turn. A newly drafted statement promises complete cooperation with investigations and full transparency regarding Andrew's personal records, but palace aides privately balk, fearing that total disclosure could reveal private diary entries where Andrew allegedly lamented losing friends and needing protection. Historians note that these entries, if released, would offer rare insight into a prince trapped between loyalty to his social circle and a dawning awareness of the moral cost. The question remains, does the palace dare to unveil that level of self-reflection? On social media, hashtags like #FadeDuke under investigation and Fee Royal accountability trend daily, fueled by leaked documents and first-hand testimonies. Fact-checkers struggle to keep pace with rumors of extradition warrants and secret immunity pacts. Even staunch monarchists express disgust, questioning how a private individual can leverage lineage to delay justice. The British public's faith in the crown, as once symbolized by duty and service, now teeters on a knife's edge of cynicism. As this chapter draws to a close, the stakes could not be higher. Prince Andrew faces his most formidable judge, the court of global public opinion, empowered by digital transparency and unrelenting investigative reporting. Every phone log, flight manifest, and unredacted affidavit carries the potential to dismantle a centuries-old institution built on inherited privilege. The palace's next moves Whether full compliance, half measures, or defiant silence will determine not only Andrew's future, but the monarchy's survival in the modern age. For now, the world watches, demands answers, and braces for revelations that could rewrite royal history forever. Behind the scenes, legal teams brace for the fallout of Andrew, whose upcoming police interview under caution, an event without precedent for a senior royal. Meticulous preparations are underway. Barristers coach Andrew on every nuance of answering questions, while palace aides assemble binders of vetted documents to present as complete records. Yet even the most exhaustive briefings may falter against fresh allegations. Insiders report that investigators intend to press Andrew on whether he personally arranged travel for underage girls, questioned aides about the nature of hush payments, and confronted him with contradictory phone logs and credit card data. A single misstep, a hesitant pause, or a deflected answer could be seized as evidence of evasion, triggering perjury inquiries that carry up to 10 years in prison under UK law. Meanwhile, civil litigators for Epstein's victims press forward. One of MEM's Jeffers' attorneys has filed a motion to reopen discovery in the New York lawsuit, seeking communications between Buckingham Palace and U.S. investigators. Court filings suggest that palace officials may have withheld emails detailing Andrew's plans for a 2012 tour of the Caribbean, allegedly orchestrated by Epstein's confidants. Victims' advocates argue that this information is critical to establishing a pattern of willful blindness. If granted, the motion could compel depositions from palace staffers and internal security consultants, an intrusion into royal privacy so severe it would dwarf the 1995 Wynne inquiry into palace leaks. Parliamentary wrath intensifies. The Home Affairs Select Committee, emboldened by cross-party support, has drafted a new bill aimed at stripping royals of automatic immunity from prosecution in cases involving commercial activities or unsanctioned private conduct. Legal experts warn that overturning long-standing letters patent would require a two-thirds majority in both houses, plus the Queen's assent, an uphill battle. Yet the government appears willing to test the boundaries of convention. In a rare show of unity, MPs from Conservative and Labour benches have agreed to co-sponsor the Monarchy Accountability Act, reflecting growing voter demand for equal treatment under the law, regardless of pedigree. At the same time, public sentiment shifts beneath royal feet. Polls show that a majority of Britons now believe no one should be above investigation, and local councils have begun renaming streets once dedicated to Andrew's patronages. Charitable organizations tied to the prince quietly rebrand, removing his crest from stationery and websites. Media outlets are running relentless exposés under banners like "The Next Chapter of Scandal" and "One Privilege Meets Petty Crime." Every front-page revelation racks up millions of digital clicks, fueling a social media frenzy that leaves palace spin doctors scrambling for control. Even Commonwealth realms are taking action. In Canada, the Governor-General has formally requested that Andrew relinquish honorary military appointments, pending the outcome of UK investigations. In Australia, state governors have suspended his civic roles under emergency powers. Legal scholars note that while these jurisdictions cannot directly remove British titles, they can refuse to recognize them, effectively isolating Andrew from any official capacity abroad. This coordinated distancing sends a clear message. The cost of silence may be a complete erasure from the stage, once reserved for royal dignitaries. International financial watchdogs have also joined the fray. The Financial Action Task Force, FFATF, has opened a review of the UK's anti-money laundering framework, partly spurred by evidence of undisclosed offshore transfers linked to Andrew's circle. If the UK falls short of global standards, it could face sanctions that ripple through the City of London, undermining its status as a leading financial hub. The Chancellor of the Exchequer has quietly assured markets that reforms are under active consideration, signaling that royal privilege will no longer shield systemic risks. Amid these converging crises, Buckingham Palace faces its ultimate test: whether to continue protecting Andrew as a symbol of continuity, or to cut him loose in the name of institutional survival. Some courtiers argue that a dignified parting, suspending his titles and returning his military honors, could offer a semblance of accountability without complete capitulation. Others insist that only full transparency of all relevant documents, flights, and communications can restore public trust. The Queen's own views remain unspoken, but historic precedent suggests that the Crown's authority depends on the consent of the governed, a consent now hanging by a thread stained with secrecy. As Section 5 concludes, one truth emerges: the monarchy's future may hinge on its willingness to accept scrutiny on the same terms as any citizen accused of serious wrongdoing. The choice is stark: maintain an archaic privilege that breeds contempt, or embrace a new era of openness that could revitalize the Crown's relevance. In the crucible of modern justice, Prince Andrew's next steps, and the palace's response, will echo far beyond any single trial, shaping the very definition of power, accountability, and the limits of privilege in a changing world. As Andrew finally prepares to sit for his long, delayed police interview, the palace's fate hangs in the balance. If he steps into the police station under caution, he submits to the same legal process that shapes every citizen's destiny. He will confront unsealed evidence, phone logs, flight manifests, sworn depositions, that may contradict every public denial he ever offered. In that crucible, truth will matter above privilege. If Andrew equivocates or points fingers, his credibility will shatter. If he confesses to personal failings, the Crown will face a reckoning that no royal spin can contain. Behind closed doors, palace advisors debate the terms of his attendance. Will he answer questions in camera, on the record, with full parliamentary privilege? Or will he demand special protections that echo the immunity once reserved for sovereigns? Every nuance of legal protocol now carries political weight. Constitutional experts warn that once the Duke claims exemption from ordinary measures, the monarchy's assertion that the law binds us all rings hollow. Conversely, if he waives privilege and cooperates fully, he sets a precedent for transparent accountability at the highest level. Across the country, families who once greeted royal tours with flowers now demand open hearings. Campaign groups plan rallies outside Scotland Yard on the morning of Andrew's interview, bearing signs that read, "No prince, no privilege," and royalty doesn't grant impunity. Parish councils and local dignitaries have removed his name from civic ceremonies, arguing that the Duke's status as an honorary colonel and patron bears no moral currency if overshadowed by allegations of sexual misconduct and cover-ups. This groundswell of grassroots pressure illustrates a profound shift. The British public no longer accepts a separate standard for blue-blooded privilege. Meanwhile, the media circus intensifies. Global broadcasters have reserved special time slots for live reaction, and legal commentators dissect every snippet of Andrew's public statements. Social media algorithms amplify citizen journalism. Snippets of palace leaks, analysis of legal filings, archived video of Andrew's past interviews, all circulated with urgent commentary. The result is an unceasing tide of commentary that leaves little room for quiet reflection. Critics warn that this noise risks precluding a fair hearing. But others say that only relentless scrutiny can ensure the palace cannot engineer a soft landing. On the diplomatic front, Commonwealth leaders quietly prepare for the fallout. Ambassadors in London have been instructed to hold fire until the legal process runs its course. Yet diplomatic cables reveal deep concern. Heads of state in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand discuss contingency plans in case Andrew's titles must be officially rescinded. Monumental events, the Queen's Jubilee ceremonies, state receptions, now hang in uncertainty. Will a central figure in the royal lineup be replaced by another family member, rearranging decades-old choreography? Those behind the scenes decisions test the monarchy's capacity to adapt while preserving continuity. Financial markets, too, watch closely. Investment firms with historical ties to royal charities are reevaluating risk. Even philanthropic foundations, once proud of Andrew's patronage, are severing ties, worried that association with scandal could jeopardize fundraising. Insurers voided coverage on a Duke-branded yacht, and luxury brands have paused any collaboration. The economic ripple effects underscore how private conduct can erode not just reputation, but revenue streams that sustain institutions. International law enforcement agencies coordinate in a final push for extradition protocols. U.S. prosecutors, long perturbed by Andrew's evasive posture, now eye an opportunity to seek his formal cooperation in ongoing trafficking investigations. Swiss banking authorities have signaled readiness to share account information, pending a mutual legal assistance request. If Andrew crosses a transatlantic red line, he could face questioning in multiple jurisdictions, transforming a reputation crisis into a multi-jurisdictional legal saga. Amid this storm, the Queen's Counsel must decide whether to invoke the latest letters patent to suspend Andrew's titles pending the outcome. That extraordinary step would mark the first time a senior royal has been stripped of dukedom solely for alleged misconduct, rather than abdication or divorce. The symbolism is raw: a duke unmade by decree, a centuries-old privilege halted by legal exigency. Supporters argue this would signal a modern monarchy responsive to public outrage. Detractors claim it sets a perilous precedent, eroding the crown's independence. As dawn breaks on the day of Andrew's interview, security converges around New Scotland Yard. Legal teams assemble in armored cars. Reporters line the pavement. Well-wishers clutch thistles and four-leaf clovers. Andrew himself will step across a threshold that few before him have crossed. A royal leaving palace grounds under caution to answer for alleged crimes. The image will be seared into national memory, a stark testimony to the assertion that no person, no matter how exalted, stands above the law. When the cameras finally fade, the real test will begin. Can the monarchy endure the hard glare of transparency without losing its essence? Will accountability for Andrew restore trust in an institution often accused of opacity? Or will the effort collapse under a weight of too many secrets? Only the interview and its aftermath can answer these questions. But one truth already holds: the era of unquestioned royal deference has ended, replaced by a demand for justice that spares no rank, spares no title, and spares no compromise.